Hey everybody. Now, I'm pretty sure we all know now about the whole TNA GFW talent exchange crossover, soon to be, very soon to be, Invasion story angle. But, you know, it's of course not the first time that, we've had these kind of things in wrestling. Now, true, a lot of fans do get excited at the perspective or at the prospect of the fact that these matches or these kind of things happen because they get dream matches, if you will, or never before seen matches, if you will, that between superstars from different promotions. And what's even more fun about it, in the eyes sometimes of the fans, is if it's done right, people won't talk down on it or talk bad about it years after it's, done and gone. Excuse me. I mean, you take a look at some of the well-known to semi-well-known to even some of the semi-regional to kind of below-the-belt well-known on a national level, if you will, invasion angles or cross-promotional angles between promotions, back in the 90s, 80s, and even in the past decade. And you'll see that a majority of them, with a few exceptions, one being, of course, 2001, we'll get to that, nobody really talked bad about them at times. They never did. Back in the 80s, you had this whole cross-promotional deal with the CWA, the WCCW, AWA, and you had the Super Clash, which gave you dream matches that you wouldn't see before, or that you've never seen before and never will see again. You had Jerry Lawler against Kerry Von Erich, I think for the first time maybe, in a unified match. CWA champion against WCCW champion. You had these kind of things take place. If you will, you kind of had these things take place, and people enjoyed them. They really did. Even if the card or the structure of the card may have been bad, fans enjoyed it because it was something they knew they would probably never see again. And it's something very rare. Now, again, some cross-promotional invasion story angles are not always well known. In fact, if you take a look at one YouTube channel here on YouTube, this person has brought this person along with another channel. I think a couple of channels have this. They kind of talk about what they dub the McMemphis era, or the McMemphis storyline. Basically, in the early to mid 90s, Vince McMahon, because of his connections with Jerry Lawler in the U.S., because the fact that Jerry Lawler worked for him, and Jerry Lawler, of course, still being part of the USWA, Vince McMahon came up with, along with Jerry Lawler, came up with a story arc to do a WWE invasion of USWA. And you basically had a lot of the and you basically had somewhat of the baby faces of WWE becoming heels in USWA. You had Tatanka before, I think a year or two before he became a heel on WWE's main roster. He was a heel in the USWA. You had Bret Hart. I think you had Savage as well. I mean, these are guys that basically, when you look on the WWE side of things, were cheered unanimously, but when you had them as part of this, they were booed. Even the freaking Undertaker was booed. And he was part of it. I mean, you had basically tag matches down in Memphis as part of this storyline that had guys that were heels on the main roster of WWE teaming with guys that were huge baby faces or somewhat huge baby faces on the main roster of WWE. Heck, you had Undertaker and Shawn Michaels teaming up. And, you know, it's just one of those situations, and fans loved it. True, many people didn't really know about it. WWE, I don't think, mentioned it on television. But it was known somewhat on a regional level, if not national level, a bit, because it was WWE invading USWA. And this was all part of course, a talent exchange as well. It was also part of bringing up guys like, finally, Jeff Jarrett to the main dance of WWE and seeing how he can do. You know, that was all part of the plan. That's why this invasion story angle, you know, did what it did, or was what it was. And nobody's ever talked down and talked bad about it. You know, true though, watching as far as I know, I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk bad about it. In fact, it's actually the first time officially, or unknown-wise, if you will, but officially in a sense, that Vince McMahon became a heel in all part of the storyline. All because of the storyline. Now another thing as well is the USWA didn't just feud or have an invasion angle with the WWE. The USWA also had a small regional, if somewhat national level invasion angle with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And this was at a time that Smoky Mountain was just starting out. And this, I think, was a little before or after, I think maybe before the WWF deal. And as far as I know, even though it was mostly regional, but somewhat nationally known, I should say, no one's ever talked bad about it. Even watching the videos of that storyline, no one talked bad about it. Why? Because despite how you felt, you knew it was a decent story angle, a decent invasion story angle. And another thing that made it decent is you had your different section of fans cheering for their federation to kick the living tar out of the other federation. You know, that is why you would have Smoky Mountain fans cheering their guys, even the bad guys, to kick the tar of the USWA. And vice versa. USWA fans cheering to have USWA kick the tar of Smoky Mountain. That is why you would have someone like, you know, like a Jerry Lawler, who's a babyface in USWA, be booed in Smoky Mountain. Same thing with, like I said, with the whole WWF invasion thing that happened, I think, later on. You know, you had these ultimate babyfaces and Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Tatanka, and Lex Luger being booed as heels and acting heelish because the USWA faithful didn't want the WWE anywhere near them. They didn't. And what was fun about the Smoky Mountain and USWA one, as far as I know, is, like I said, you'd have the Smoky Mountain guys on their territory be the baby faces, but when they would show up in USWA, they'd be the heels. And like I said, you basically, and what made it fun is you didn't just have two different promotions going at each other, you had two different groups and sets of fans that preferred one over the other, and it made it work. Even when Ring of Honor and CZW did their invasion angle back in the early to mid-90s, mostly the mid-90s, fans of CZW would boo the ROH guys and cheer their guys, and then on the other side, you'd have the ROH fans booing the CZW guys. And it worked, and no one, even though this through the internet was known on a somewhat semi-national level thanks to the internet, the reason no one's ever talked down about that promotional crossover between ROH and CZW is because it was done right and you had your different groups of fans cheering for one or the other. And the other thing that made it unique as well, and I think even Smoky Mountain did this in their feud with USWA, is it all culminated in a signature match that took place at the other promotion's show. In the case of Ring of Honor and CZW, they had the Cage of Death, which is a CZW signature, take place in an ROH show. And I think Smoky Mountain or USWA had a signature match take place at a Smoky Mountain show. or vice versa. I don't really know. But it worked because not only did you have two different sets of fans, or two different certain groups of fans that were able to support one or the other federations, but you were also able to use different match stipulations or even merge them together to culminate in some interesting matchups that fans enjoyed, which is why they never talked down about these. You know, you take a look at 2001 with the WCW deal, and a lot of people will say it had potential. The only problem is you didn't have that WCW core audience there to cheer for their guys. You didn't have a WCW arena or venue or show for the WWE guys to invade on, and vice versa for the WCW guys to do, and that's what, in my opinion, what really killed it. Really killed it right in the end, is you didn't have what all these other invasion angles had. You didn't have two different core audiences cheering for one or the other. You didn't have two different diverse shows, you know, for the companies to allow the other promotions, wrestlers or stars to come invade on. You didn't have it. You didn't have it whatsoever. And I think, in my opinion, that's one of the main things that hurt it. It really did. It really hurt it. You know, true, it had some good things. I'm not going to be someone that's going to bash it for not having some good things. It did, but the majority of it, the reason it was hurt is because you didn't have the big name stars that could represent WCW, and two, you didn't have a WCW core audience for the WCW stars to draw from, or draw support from, and three, you didn't have a WCW show or venue or whatever for them to call their own, and a place for the WWE guys to come and invade and be the heels, and then vice versa on the other end. Vice versa on the other end, with Raw and SmackDown, you had places for them, for WCW to come and invade there. But you didn't have anything for WCW on the other end, and I think that's what killed it, in a sense, in the end. Not just signing the names that they needed to sign, but the fact that you didn't have what all these other invasion angles had. You didn't have another core audience to support the WCW stars that the WCW stars could draw from. You didn't have that WCW faithful audience. You didn't have it. No matter what. I mean, heck, even when the NWO thing went down, it was more believable because of the fact that you were actually trying to separate the NWO as its own entity, and thus they started to having their core audience cheering them and booing WCW, or WCW somewhat still had their core audience who would cheer WCW and boo the NWO. So that kind of worked because it made it more believable. As far as TNA and GFW's situation, I don't know how they're going to capitalize on this. I mean, you take a look at the spoilers for the next few weeks, and again, I don't know when the whole heel turn for GFW and Jeff and Karen's going to take place, but on the TNA side of things, you know, you have TNA being the baby faces and GFW being the heels. But on the other hand, you take a look at some of the footage and everything from the GFW Amped tapings, you have Bobby Roode, who's a babyface, I guess, in this whole TNA invasion deal with GFW, being booed and acting like a heel, which he naturally can be right off the bat, in a GFW ring. Now, here's the thing. This invasion deal between both companies could work, or could have worked if you read the spoilers. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. It doesn't work because only one company has a television deal. The other company does not. Its show and its live events that it's had are only being known because of what people report and what people have recorded. That's it. That is it. That's the whole scenario. Now again, this did have the potential to work if AMP, GFW AMP, which is GWF's flagship show, would have had a national television deal by now. It would have worked because at least it would make it more different. Like you could have GFW, let's say on what channel could, let's say you could have them on Fox, not Fox Sports. You can have them like let's say on Comcast, on one of the Comcast sports networks. That could work, believe it or not. But you can have them on that, or even heck, probably put them on the CW, which really would give them a national scope. But have them on any one of those, while Destination America has TNA, and that would work in a sense because you would, on one hand, on the Destination America showings of Impact, you'd have GWF guys coming in and invading, and yet these would be the same guys you would have saw on the CW's broadcasting of Amped. And then you would have the TNA guys doing the same thing there. And that potentially would have worked. But the thing, it doesn't. And without that national exposure, without that national television deal that GFW Amped would need, in the eyes of many fans that still support TNA and someone interested in GFW, GFW is nothing more than a group faction, a heel. That the promotion's nothing is basically for the fans that still believe, in a sense, they're going to look at GFW as being nothing more than a promotion of a-holes. You know, you don't have that certain group. You don't have that, like I said, that. Well, you do. You actually do. You do have that core GFW audience that's slowly growing, believe it or not. I mean, heck, you take a look at the first tapings, and they had a decent freaking audience in the Orleans Arena in Las Vegas of 1,000 plus people, I think. So you got that audience that's slowly growing, that core audience, but you didn't have that core audience there for a majority of that invasion angle. You didn't. Now, true, in a sense, people are saying, well, they're still... Now, true, some people might say, well, they're still carrying on the invasion angle. Heck, you have Robert Roode and a few others wrestling in GFW in their tournaments. And that's true, they are. But again, it doesn't make sense if it doesn't coherent with each other. I mean, what are you going to do? 2016 comes around, what? Now you're going to put the shoe on the other, you're going to put the foot on the other shoe, and GFW is going to have a television deal, and TNA's not, and they're going to continue their invasion angle against GFW, and you know, try to take over their show and get back on the air. Is that what the plan is? Because it really doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, true, storyline-wise, it might make sense if you have someone like Dixie Carter being desperate enough to try to get TNA back on national television, try to get back on the map, and take down the one company owned by the one guy she thought she could trust. That's one way of doing it. But, you know, overall, unless you have, like I say, these two different national television deals, it doesn't really work. And when you read the spoilers, especially after what occurs. I mean, here's what happens, long story short. PJ Black, Justin Gabriel, becomes the King of the Mountain champion, which is part of the talent exchange, cross-promotion between both companies. And this probably takes place this Wednesday. I think it's maybe 2 weeks, a week or 2 weeks before the whole GFW turning heel and becoming the invasion thing takes place. But I do probably understand that the attacks by the GFW stars will occur maybe this week. I'm not saying they will, but I think that's what's going to happen. Now, speaking of which, you have Drew McIntyre of all people, reveal in a segment that's going to air maybe a week or two from now, or from this Wednesday, reveal in a segment that Jeff Jarrett and Karen Jarrett had played Dixie Carter.